Ooh, that's some intense music right there. Hello, everyone. I am Doug. This is the Reclaiming Retro channel, where we do all sorts of content, discussion, live streams around retro gaming and retro pop culture in general. You can find all sorts of stuff like videos about the retro gaming convention scene here, at least in the eastern United States. We've gone to a bunch of shows. We do those. Videos about things that are relevant to retro gaming. We did some stuff about some Atari games that are near and dear to my heart in my quest to get a new, a very rare Atari item. So this and that, and you're going to see more content. We've got a lot in production right now, and we're going to be rolling that out. But for now, on Wednesdays at 8, we go live. We play some old school games, and what I will do, I kind of want to fall into the cadence of I'll go ahead and pick some games that I think are interesting, or we could talk about, or I've got some fun stories about. But I'm also open to suggestions, and I'll partition this as if there is a specific Atari or original Nintendo game that's meaningful to you, that you had some enjoyment with, or would like to see me try to play. Maybe it's a hard game and you want to see if I can navigate it. Feel free to shout it out, and we'll give it a go. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and spin up some games that I think were actually interesting for various reasons, and we'll play through them. So that's what I'm thinking. I'll just start off right now. We'll just set the table on this. This particular show is dedicated to what I'll call retro gaming. I know I've seen in the chat interest in like Fall Guys and stuff like that. That's not a retro game. I do appreciate the suggestion, but a little outside the scope of what we do here. But again, I will be happy to take suggestions for things that fall in our category, and we'll check them out. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to fire up a game that we were playing before off screen, and it was interesting. From the Atari library, as we said before on the stream, the original Atari, the Atari 2600, as far as their first color game cartridge-based system goes, there were a lot of attempts to port the classic arcade games of the time down to the venerable Atari 2600, despite having a minuscule amount of computing power compared to the actual arcade game hardware of the time. So one of the arcade games that was very popular in the early 80s was Burger Time. I actually played it a few weeks ago on the stream. Most people are familiar with the Burger Time arcade game. There was a respectable port of the game done on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Of course, that was a few years after Arcade Burger Time, and the technology available for the home systems was, I'd say probably on par with the hardware you might find in, for example, 1981 or 1982 arcade games. So you didn't sacrifice a lot of playability, graphics capabilities, so on and so forth on those systems. The Atari, however, predated all of the hardware that Burger Time was ever designed for by a wide margin, and it becomes challenging to the point of almost comical when you try to port an arcade game to the Atari 2600. But they tried, and so Burger Time was ported, and I'm going to pull it up because I just thought it was like, this is so silly what came out the other side, as they say. Let's go ahead and move to my correct panel here. There we go. So this is Burger Time for the Atari 2600, and I gotta say, like I said, it's rough. We have here. I am the I am the chef in the middle of the screen. I guess you could say that. There is a white square coming after me. That is Mr. Egg, by the way. That's an egg. And this square is a tomato. So this is a tomato. There we go. And we've just squished it. The only other object on the screen that is roughly close in approximation to the appropriate character is Mr. Hot Dog over here. Oh, I got to run away from Mr. Hot Dog. And this thing that looked like a glove is French fries. So, and that little yellow line, that's Mr. French Fry. Hold on. Oh, we got to do a little maneuver. Oh, that was salt. The playability isn't terrible on this, but having said that, the first time we looked at this, myself and my producer, Cassandra Hammerstone, we were struggling to determine what we were looking at. But in fairness, now that we actually play it, it's not terrible. There are worse Atari 2600 arcade ports out there than this. I will give them that much. So, there you go. Let's see. Maybe we can get through the first screen here. Oh, here's the problem. I'm gonna sound lame here, but the gamepad has a tough time emulating a 4-direction analog controller. So you really have to your movements have to be pretty good. Wow. Ooh. Also, that's extremely loud. I'll just adjust the volume on that so we don't blow your ears out. And obviously, Burger Time, no matter which version you're playing, the difficulty amps up considerably after the first board. So I don't think that there's here's what I was saying. You got to line that up perfectly. I don't know that we're going to be seeing any world record attempts here tonight. But I think you get the idea. Let's move along here. You get the idea. So that was Burger Time. What do we have here? Let me just check up here. Wondering what else. I'm looking for some other things to take a peek at in the Atari library here. What were some examples of some? Now, here's an example of an arcade port that was actually, I always thought was pretty good. It is the port of Centipede, the arcade game. And like I said, I think that this actually came out pretty well. And even though this was a trackball game, the joystick works somewhat well. It's not perfect, but it's not terrible either, especially if you... Well, you get the idea. So this was an example of one of the better ported arcade games to the Atari 2600. There's a few others as well. Now, everyone knows that Pac-Man was, so bad as a port relative to the arcade game that it, many people make it one of the prime suspects of the downfall of the original Atari company, since they made so gosh darn many copies of Pac-Man, just assuming that everyone was going to buy it no matter what the quality of the port. And of course, people didn't like it. Here, let's put it up on the screen. So this was the Atari port of Pac-Man, the infamous. So here I am, this not circular but sort of weird six-sided thing. And instead of eating dots, I'm eating wafers, I believe. And I'm haunted by 4... Now, in fairness, the ghosts are a lot more credible as ghosts because they flicker so much and you can barely see them. I mean, while much more difficult to navigate, I would think that if ghosts were chasing you, they wouldn't be a solid color and completely trivial to see like in the arcade Pac-Man. So, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Maybe people got it wrong, and this was the more accurate Pac-Man because you shouldn't be able to just see ghosts in plain sight. Oh, and that's a vitamin, by the way. It looks more like a Domino's pizza box, but it was a vitamin pill. Which apparently, according to the manual, makes Pac-Man strong. Now, I know we also have vitamins today that are marketed by people like Frank Thomas, baseball legend. See now, look at that. I got killed by something just out of thin air. And so that isn't necessarily that they did a crappy job at Pac-Man for the Atari. It was more accurate historically. So there you go. I'm not going to make you watch Atari Pac-Man all night, but you know, again, a real-time. I feel like I've had an epiphany here. People gave that game a bad rap, unfortunately. Spent too much time on Centipede as a kid. Me too. So we had Centipede. We had, again, for the Atari, we had Millipede, which was also a very good port of the game. So Centipede, Millipede, and then they did do an NES port. Wasn't quite as good, Millipede. But the Atari versions were very good. Now, they did make a trackball controller for the old school Atari. I have one actually in my project pile in my garage. At some point, I really need to get around to getting that working again, because that would be a fun thing to show off. I don't think a lot of kids had that. They made those. I think they made those after Centipede came out, and they realized that it really wasn't great to play with the joystick, and I think they kind of rushed that to market. But it's a fun little attachment. Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde they are the correct names, at least in the United States, for the Pac-Man ghosts. And I don't know if they used those names in the Atari Pac-Man. I'd have to find the manual. I'm not sure if they did that. But yes, that is technically the correct names. Now going back to the Atari library. So what's interesting is, Pac-Man, from a technical perspective, was just not great. They learned their lesson because about a year, 1982, about a year after Pac-Man, they also ported Ms. Pac-Man. And I've got to tell you, everything they got wrong about the Pac-Man port, for the most part, they fixed with Ms. Pac-Man. So let's take a quick look at that. Let me just move my screen over here. There you go. So this is Ms. Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. And like I said, technically, it's a much better port. It's got some music there. You'll see here the maze is a lot more true to what you would expect in the arcade game. You've got the four ghosts. They have their distinct colors. They have their, I guess you would say their mannerisms down. You've got the fruit are actually fruit. They're not vitamin pills. So this was a much, much more accurate Pac-Man type game. Had they released Pac-Man with this level of, technical proficiency or, correctness to the original, Atari's fortunes may have been wildly different if they actually did legitimately sell millions of Pac-Man and they were really well received. So it's an interesting look back when you play Pac-Man and then Ms. Pac-Man on the Atari. Such a different outcome. Like I said, had they put that kind of attention to detail in the original Pac-Man. Hey, Rise to the Equation, how you doing? What would be the example of one of your Atari or NES games? Oh, I'm sorry. What was that Coleco guy? That's a good question. I'm gonna say not really, with an asterisk, right? So. This is kind of giving away my age, but that's okay. The first video game system or computer, anything that I got, was the original Atari. And shortly after that, my parents decided that, I enjoyed technology, which I did. I mean, how do you give off tells that you enjoy technology when you're 5, right? I guess it was just I was, like addicted to playing Atari. But seemed into it, right? So my parents decided, I want to say, I think it was the Christmas of 81. I believe that is correct. Could have been 81, 82. So they got me a Commodore 64 computer for Christmas. And that was my first exposure to, I guess you could say, computing, above and beyond just controlling a 4-directional joystick. And I immediately got into basic programming, and we didn't have a lot of money. So I got the computer, and I got what they called a data set, which was it was like a tape recorder device, and you would store the games on cassette tape. The cassette tape had a basic programming game called Lemonade Stand. It's like a simulation of running a lemonade stand. You buy cups and lemons and sugar. You make your lemonade. You have to set the price day by day based on like the weather, and it's like capitalism for 5-year-olds. Like mind blown. But for some reason, I enjoyed playing it. But then I was like, okay. I looked at, I guess I found my inner computer hacker at like 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever I was, because it's like, well, is there any way I could like make the game give me more cups or sugar if I don't have the money? So then I got into basic programming, and I like figured out pretty quickly that like you could see all the things, and I ended up like rewriting the game to change the name of the game to something goofy. And I put in like these little, like the equivalent of cheat codes where you could put something in and get like 1,000,000 sugars or something, and I started hacking it. And then and then I started expanding the game. I put in a thing where it mattered about the health of the people who bought your lemonade. So I added this thing where like if you put no lemons and you just give them sugar and water, they like go into like a diabetic coma, and you get penalized for it. Like you could kill the people that were buying the thing. Like if you give them like 30 lemons, like they get I think I called it lemon poisoning or something. But like, so I had this whole thing to the game. I have a twisted mind. Sorry, where was I? So Commodore 64, we did have a ColecoVision, right? So it was, believe, right after the Commodore 64, we had one. I got to be honest with you, because I was so enamored with the Commodore 64, playing the games and programming, I didn't like, my sister played a lot, and that was it. Like, she was the only one in the house that played the Coleco. I would occasionally, but I didn't, and I feel bad for that. Because here's the other thing. Let me go on a little bit of this is kind of almost like a podcast show, so work with me on this. We're not sure what this show is yet. It could end up being just a retro podcast. But anyhow, what had happened was, I deeply regret now not having been on the Coleco train from jump, because the original software for the ColecoVision included some amazing, very accurate ports. I mean, the port of Donkey Kong was amazing, given what they were working with on the hardware. And I really got myself into Coleco when I found, much later in life, when I started collecting, I found the elusive Atom computer, the computer add-on for ColecoVision, and I had spent some time in that scene messing about, and that's where I really got myself acclimated to the ColecoVision software library, which of course, includes, as a subset of that, the Atom library. A lot of really great games on there. I think that I don't blame Coleco for the criticism I have, is that the controller was very wonky, right? It was like an Intellivision-esque disc that you've got to rotate around, and there's some games where, like, I think like the Smurf Rescue game on Coleco, you have to because of the way the controller works, if you don't make the move like pixel microsecond perfect, you got yourself a dead Smurf right there. And I remember we were playing last summer. I had found an old ColecoVision at a yard sale, and I was fixing it up. And my producer, Cassandra Hammerstone, and I were in here, and I put the Smurf game on. And I wanted to show her. I would show you how to play a Smurf game. And she's watching. And about 5 minutes in, she's like, "How many dead Smurfs are there now?" And I'm like, "I'm not that good at math." There were a lot of deceased virtual Smurfs. I'm looking over. I'm trying to see if I can get a rise out of my producer. Looking over, she's listening. Like she's there as a safety bar to tell me I said something terrible that I need to immediately apologize for, or I don't understand a thing that's going on here. But anyhow, I got my I got into Coleco too late in life, I guess, is what I suppose I'm saying. Basic computing on season. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I loved the basic programming on the Commodore 64. Apple II was my family's first computer. Oh yeah. Now, we didn't have an Apple II growing up in my house. That's another case of something that I got into later in life. When I was in grade school, we had computer class in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. In the 6th grade, we had Apple IIs, the original form factor we all know and love, the big giant, like, I don't know what to say, like boat size thing with the clicky keys and all that goodness. And then in 7th and 8th grade, now this is weird. No, I don't know if it's weird because I know it was the push they were making. My school ditched the Apple. And then in 7th and 8th grade, we had the Texas Instruments TI-99-4A. That's what they wanted to teach us computing on. And there were a few people I knew that had the TI-99-4A. But not many. I think 2 or 3 people I knew. But everyone either had a Commodore. If they had a home computer, it was almost certainly a Commodore 64. There was a couple of like Atari 400 and 800s, but yeah. There weren't a lot of Apples around here. But again, I mean, one of the forefathers of computing. Yep, the controller did have its issues. And I know that they made third-party. There was even, I believe there was first-party Coleco controller. Was it the punching game one where it's like a grip and then there was a good stick, like an arcade-type stick? I know they had that. The other systems that struggled so much with controllers, which is ColecoVision. Actually, that was probably the third biggest struggle with controllers. The second being Intellivision. And I don't blame Mattel. When they're designing the Intellivision, almost alongside the original Atari, you have no precedent. You have no design patterns. You have no history. No one has come before you in refining and inventing the game controller that we know it today. So they tried, I guess you could say like the touch thing, where you just got to touch a thing. In retrospect, with decades of invention, we realize it sucked. But I don't give any of those companies grief for those things. And then of course the biggest debacle I think on controllers was the Atari 5200 by a mile, simply because the engineering of it was almost guaranteed to break almost from jump. So I mean, in the fact that the joystick didn't center, good luck getting it to do what you wanted it to. So yeah, while Colecos were suboptimal, I would say, yeah, there was at least a few examples from that era where the controllers were even worse. And and it's unfortunate. I'm looking down. We have a list of future Reclaiming Retro standalone episodes that we're working on, and one that we have is taking a second look at the Atari 5200. Because I will make the contention that the games for the Atari 5200 were pretty good. A lot of really good arcade ports, like a great Pac-Man port, like Space Invaders, things like that. And the system gets panned even to this day. Like, people say it sucked because of the controllers, and the controllers were basically broken. If the Atari 5200 shipped with great controllers, people would be revisiting and reviewing and looking at the Atari 5200 library all day long because there's great games for it, in my humble opinion. So we are going to make an episode deep diving into that. Aunt was a teacher and suggested to my parents because of apples being used in the school system. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think Apple made its way into homes based on the fact that they were being used in schools, which I think was a brilliant strategy by Apple, getting that initial foothold. I mean, there was competition, and that was a great strategy, in my humble opinion. Did I have a favorite arcade that I would hang out at after school? That's a good question. There was a couple. The main one we had. I grew up in a shoreline town in Connecticut, and I was we were super lucky. I lived in an apartment building, and just 2 blocks away from our apartment building was my school, which was at a Catholic grade school. The church, and the church and the school were 2 blocks away from our apartment building, so I didn't even need to worry about busing. By the time I was in fourth grade, my parents were. It's such a different time. By the time I was in fourth grade, so let's see, I'm 9, right, at that point in time. So we're talking 1982. 1982. You go back to 1982. The idea of letting your fourth grader just walk to school, even if it's just 2 blocks, like by him or herself, would be like mind-blowing today, right? Like, that can't happen. You're going to get captured by ninjas. But back in good old 81, so I would go off to school and everything was fine. Nothing ever happened. This ties into your favorite arcade story. There was also a video arcade a couple blocks from the school. So if I was feeling frisky after school, I could walk a couple more blocks down, and there was an arcade. It was called Video Circus. It was a chain or anything. It was just an independent arcade. It was next to a Friendly's ice cream. So if for some reason I was balling out of control, and why I would be is a different story. Like, talking to my paper route business, and well, there's 2 businesses I had when I was a kid. Boy, there's a lot. See, and this is choose your own adventure, and these are all kind of retro themed. Do I continue on describing the arcade or how I made all my money? I could get both done. So we would go to Video Circus. And if I had a few bucks, and I mean, at that age, that's the most you're gonna have. And you go, four tokens for $1, and you go and play some games. And for me, it was usually Ms. Pac-Man. They had a couple of games that were relatively obscure by arcade standards. The most significant of which was they had Food Fight. The Atari arcade game Food Fight. We played it on this stream a few times now. One of my all-time favorites. It's like in the artwork on the YouTube channel banner. I would play the snot out of that. But it was just a great location. Like, even so, as a kid, I could just walk there if I wanted to. So I guess by default, my neighborhood arcade, and that became, where the personal preferences I have for arcade games today are formed. Even the ones that are a little off brand. There was a couple of much larger arcades in my town that I would beg my parents to take me to whenever I could convince them to do so. There was one that was like a giant pool hall, and they realized, and it'd been there for like decades, and they realized in the 70s that they had to get into pinball machines because that was all the rage. So they had like this giant pool hall lined with maybe 100 electromechanical 70s pinball machines, and then they had another room, and they just jumped on, like, with both feet on the arcade thing, and the guy that owned it had went and bought like one of every game, like not just the things like Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, the classics, like anything that would come out, he had one. And so, like, the most obscure things you can imagine were in there. So that was always a fun time to play. And yeah, that's it. All right, one last thing. There was an arcade a couple towns over that the name of it, to this day, I believe, was one of the coolest names for an arcade in the early 80s. It was called the Gompers Arcade, Gomper. I don't know what a Gomp or a Gomper is. I don't think it's anything bad because they couldn't have named an arcade after it. But I always thought that was the coolest name for an arcade, and I haven't really topped that. And let me catch up with chat here a little bit. Missed the 80s. Yeah, God, I missed the 80s too. Oh yeah, so on that last thread, right? So what allowed 8 or 9 year old me to have funds for video games or going to the arcade to play. So I had actually 2 jobs. I had a paper route. So and going back to the 80s, a time where children would deliver newspapers door to door in the morning or early afternoon, obviously in exchange for tips. And that was like a lot of kids my age. That was their first exposure to earning money for doing something. And of course, as you might imagine, the value of that gig is relative to the specific neighborhood that you're working, and you figure out where all the wealthy neighborhoods are, obviously, that presumably you'll get the best tips, and it's a whole thing. And I had a couple streets for a couple years, and it worked out well. And then the other gig that I had, I was grown up in a somewhat religious household, and they sent me to Catholic school, and I was also an altar boy at the church in my hometown. And so we're not going to deep dive or getting into religion, but it's just background context. How do you make money from that? Well, so what would happen is if there was a wedding or a funeral, right, in that church, that's like extraneous. That's not like you go to church once a week. That's like a different like event or service. In most of the times, like a wedding or a funeral, or at least if you were doing a wedding or a funeral on a weekday, right, not on a weekend, they happen during the day. So because like a wedding or a funeral is like a type of like church event, right, you would typically have altar boys, and if it's a Catholic church. But obviously, if it's during the day, the people who would serve as the altar boys were in school, typically in the Catholic school associated with it. So long story short, you would get to leave whatever class you were doing if you have to serve at one of these weddings or funerals. And the protocol, at least within the Catholic Church, is that the individuals that are subject of those ceremonies tip the altar boys. It's a gratuity. And I'll tell you, I don't know what it was. I was good at conveying sympathy or delight, depending on what the occasion was. I made bank being an officiant at weddings and funerals when I was a child. So I did have a pretty impressive Atari collection. There you go. kind of a little side trip there, but I consider that's inbounds to retro, considering that it was all stuff that happened in the 80s. I have integrity. I would not dip into the collection plate. That wouldn't be part of it. I'll tell you what. Let's see here. I'm gonna dip into my list of games. There was a few other anecdotes I had, but it'll refresh my memory if I actually look at the game list here that I have in the emulator. I would love to play some games if there are specific. That's the controller powered off. If there are specific Atari or Nintendo or even actual arcade games from that early era that are meaningful, I'm open to suggestions to check them out and give them a go and share my thoughts. Absolutely. I'm going to set the ability to do that up while give you guys a chance if you want to fire off a request. I think I have pretty much the complete Atari and NES and a lot of Paperboy, Zookeeper. Oh, boy. So we played Paperboy last time, but, I love the fact that you mentioned Zookeeper. I want to do that one next. So Zookeeper is interesting, right? Zookeeper never got at the time a port to any of the home consoles. It was strictly an arcade game. Now, I actually did a video of this on my channel. They did port Zookeeper like a year or two ago to the Atari 2600. It's an amazing port. But, of course, most people will recognize Zookeeper, the arcade game. And I will say that is one of my all-time favorites as well, in all sincerity. Let's fire this bad boy up. Hang on here. One moment. Just getting it all going properly. All right. I just want to make sure that we get the audio as well. Okay. We got Zookeeper. I just want to, like I said, just let me make sure that the... hang on. Okay, yes, we do have game audio. All right. Hang on, I gotta just, this one I can only have one screen going at the time, so forgive me. Okay, there we go. What is the button for? There we go. So, Zookeeper, you are Zeke the Zookeeper, and your goal in life is to keep the animals inside the zoo. They will attempt to escape. Oh, I didn't find the correct button for jump. Hold on. I get one free try. Now, that's very forgiving. There we go. Okay, we have the jump button. So, as you go through here, you're laying down bricks. You can't touch the animals. We missed the net. There's a net. If you get the net, it's like an Energizer in Pac-Man. Yeah, this is the MAME emulator that we're running here. There we go. So the game, here's what I love about this game. The gameplay is just amazingly simple, but effective. So here's the scoop here. There we go. You get the scoop, you capture the animals and send them back to the cage. So you're scored on how many you keep inside the bricks. Now, this bonus stage is really hard because the controls are intentionally a little wonky. And you got it. And there's the problem with the coconut at the top. But having said that, the gameplay is simple but super effective. It's got unique gameplay elements as well. It's just a great game, and it just did not get the love it deserves. At all. Like I said, it was never chosen to be ported. But it's a great game. It's one of these games where you do have to kind of focus, especially as you get to the fourth and the fifth level. Now, what we'll see is, I believe after this level, there's another type of bonus round that you matriculate to if you beat the regular bonus round. It gives you a chance to earn an extra life, but it's a weird thing where you can also lose your lives chasing after it, but it's also not optional. So it's tricky. Let's see. I'm trying to remember where this next watermelon shows up. Right here. Okay. I believe that means that the scoop will be somewhere down here. Not clear if I'm going to be able to get to it, but we'll try. Here we go. There we go. All right. And we're back up to the second round of this. And this takes a little bit of a... Oh, boy. Oh, wow. Oh. I thought I had it for a second there. And that was it. Okay, so that's Zookeeper. Like I said, an outstanding game. One of the unheralded arcade hits. You had mentioned also Frogger and Kicks. We played Frogger a week ago, but I would like to check out Kicks because that's an interesting. It's another example of unique gameplay. And Kicks was the first game to utilize the specific mechanic that made it compelling, which was kind of, how do you describe it? Well, I mean, we're going to have to pull it up. It defies description. You're basically drawing shapes on a screen trying to claim territory. And then, of course, claiming territory from the adversaries, the obstacles that are trying to get you. Again, I'm going to pull it up right now. We're scrolling through all of the different games we have. There's quite a few, so it'll take me a moment. Let's see here. There's definitely, to be sure, strategy is absolutely the difference between success and failure. And I know there's, so the gameplay with kicks too is interesting because, and this will make more sense when we pull it up, you can change or you can have control over the speed at which you draw, the lines you're drawing. And while that may not seem important, just saying it in isolation, it's actually extremely important. Hang on, I'm still kind of navigating here, trying to get to the correct ROM set. I believe I have it right here. All right, let's see what we got. This should be it. Yeah, it is. There we go. Okay, hold on one second here. There we go. So this is Kicks, and I've always pronounced it Kicks. So you are, here's the attract screen. So that little red thing there, drawing lines, that's basically you. And if you draw boxes, you will turn them green or orange depending on how fast you drew them, and you score points. So you want to cover 75% of the play field. So the Kicks is your opponent, that spirally thing in the middle, and it kind of spins and spirals. If it touches you while you're drawing a line, you lose a life. So again, oh yeah, and don't get caught in a spiral death trap, right? You have to make sure that you can make a shape. So again, it's an example of very simple gameplay and description, but compelling in practice. I'm going to give this a try. I make no promises that this is going to be coherent, but let's go for it here. So we move your little guy, right? And as you can see here, now there's these little fuse things, so you kind of are forced to do something, right? So you see that how we're going to take the fast draw. So you see I'm drawing boxes, and as you can see where it says claimed at the top. So this is, I've claimed now 12%, 14%. I have to claim 75% without anything touching me while I'm drawing my line, right? There we go. That was actually too close for comfort. Well, there we go. So one of the strategies here is to try and box in the kicks. It's easier said than done, and I will freely admit I'm not good at it. But so there you go. So that's the kicks caught me when I was drawing. So what people try to do is create these little spaces where if it gets stuck, for example, up in that little like cubby hole I'm making out in the, I didn't move fast enough. Or alternately, I could do this and just claim the space, but I got kicked. So that is Kicks. Again, another great example of a game that was like, there's so many other games out there now that use that same mechanic to uncover a puzzle or a picture or something. But this was the first. And so it was such a great time, you figure between 1980 and 1985, because you got the chance to see all these distinct genres of games birthed before you. So super, super cool stuff. Okay, let me see here. Try, I would like to check out Frogger too. Let me see if we can get that going quickly. There's something, so there's a technical thing with the way I have this emulator set up where I haven't enabled the ability to type in letters to shortcut to a game. So I have to scroll through a mountain of entries to get to here, but I want to check out Frogger quickly. Yeah, that was all those games from either a graphical or, again, a gameplay perspective were truly cutting edge at the time that we saw them first. And by the time you had 83, you're at 83, a lot of people had Atari. And so if you go to the arcade and you see something that technically is like, a million miles past Atari, it was mind-blowing. Even if it wasn't even that particularly representative of a movement forward at the time, it was super impressive for people to see. I think we've got Frogger right here. Hold on. Go down a little bit more. There we go. Frogger. All right. Hopefully this loads properly. I think it will. Yes, it will. All right. So we got Frogger. I hope I'm not. Did we? I'm gonna have to resize that, huh? Let me see what the size ends up being. Oh no, you get here I am. It's part of it's cut off, but we know who Frogger is. There we go. So this, of course, is the actual arcade Frogger, not a port. The Atari port of Frogger was quite good, I have to say. Again, given the technology limitations on the table, it was quite good. There we go. The timing on these hops can be tricky, and the middle three, I guess, what do you call them? The little places that you bring the frog to are the easiest, because the timing. Well, the timing to get the far left one is really difficult. Oh, how did that not work out? I feel mildly cheated on that one, but okay. It's so difficult because you have to catch the log that you're going to surf at exactly the right point. Like, see here, I'm screwed. Like, I have to make the jump to the top row of logs in the pod at the same time. So the timing is really tricky on that. I'm going to give that one more try because I'm a bit stubborn. And I feel like I should be able to get the first set of frogs home safely. Let's see what we got here. This could be a little tricky too. This middle log, because of the speed at which it travels. Here we go. There we go. All right, got it. So once you got that far left one, the rest is an awful lot easier because you don't have to worry about like dead perfect timing from this level to the next one. You can take your time here, take them nice and easy. That's always, in all of the home ports of Frogger too, that's always been the most difficult aspect of the game, is that far left spot. Like here, I can take the time I need to get a safe position. Let's see what we got here. Oh! I got on one of the disappearing pads. Let's see if we can't get these last two frogs rehomed. I'll do the one on the far end first. There we go. All right. Let's see if we can't get that. All right. Oh, of course, there's the. You can. I was gonna say dock. I don't know if that's rude. Make the acquaintance of a lady. How's that? We did there, and we got some extra points. So there you go. That's Frogger. That's Frogger, folks. Definitely one of the classics, to be sure. That left, yeah, the cubby hole. You know what? That's probably the right way to do it. I should have said cubby hole the whole time. I was trying to think of what do you call the spot where you go to send your frog to not eternal but temporary rest, perhaps with the accompaniment of a partner, of a romantic partner. There really were some NSFW elements of Frogger when you think about it. I wonder how, which of course makes me wonder now. Now I'm going off on a tangent here. Think about this. You're a kid like 5 years old. You go down to the arcade and Frogger. And even at 5, you can learn things pretty quickly. You learn the basics of the mechanics of how a game works. And you figure out you're a frog and you got to get to the other side. And you pick up the other frog. How many kids went to their parents and asks, like, why do I jump on the other frog, and what do we do? Like, and you're the parent, right? And you're like, is this it? The video game's gonna force me into the birds and the bees talk before I'm ready or want to? I was hoping my child would never discover any of this stuff. Like, was Frogger the catalyst for a lot of uncomfortable talks between parents and their children? I wonder that. I never thought about that until just now. So there you go. But I mean, it's all on brand. I think what I like to do is celebrate, like, it was a different time in the early 80s with the games. And we could talk all day long about the nuances and the minutia of games, and we will do a lot of that. But I think it's also important to keep this within the context of enjoying, like, the memory of that time. And I'll say one thing here, and I'll be very brief about it. One of the things that inspired me to want to put up this channel, Reclaiming Retro, is that I love retro games and retro game collecting, but the content on YouTube that I was looking for, I was having a hard time finding, because a lot of people look at games, retro games, and what they think about before they think about the memory they have with it, or how it brings anything back of any kind of emotional value is strictly like a stock in the newspaper. Like, oh yeah, that's $40 these days. And that's cool, I guess. I mean, especially if you're lucky enough to have saved a lot of these things and you have a lot of the stuff from your childhood, it's very nice to know that it's valuable. And I don't have any problem with anyone that is invested, no pun intended, in buying and selling these things. That's fine. To each their own, your prerogative. But, I was having a hard time finding real, genuine, organic celebrations of the games and the history. And there are some great content creators that do it. It's not a barren wasteland, but I just felt compelled to want to add to the voices of folks that just like to kind of wax nostalgic, regardless of the economy of retro games. So that's what our goal is here. Like, you're not going to see any videos where we're like hip checking grandmas at yard sales, or going into like a video game store with a camera and like, I can make $5 flipping this on eBay. No, there's like 100 other channels for that. Like, I just generally want to share the weird, wacky upbringing I had, and I love hearing about other people's experiences. So it's like a catalyst for colorful comment sections and some great dialogue about these subjects. I will say also, because I've had a few people asking, and I will say that we have some interesting content in the pipeline on this channel. We're going to do a book review, which is pretty cool. But I promise you, it's very much on brand, and I think you'll all get some joy out of that. We're going to continue to play some of the older games that I thought were relevant, that are interesting. We've got some more convention reviews and reports, and we've got an interesting, for the end of the year, we're going to rank our favorite retro game conventions based on our experiences there. So that's going to be pretty cool. And we're going to continue some of the short footage as well. I was playing like 60-second retro game challenges. We're going to make some more of those. I think people thought those were fun. And of course, we're going to have a live stream, which I think is like where it kind of comes together, and folks can say, hey, do you remember that game, this game? And we'll fire them up and play them and discuss our experiences with them. So there you go. Am I planning to hit fun spot? Here's the thing. The only regrets we have here at the studio is we didn't get a chance to make it out to Fun Spot, which is up in New Hampshire. Fun Spot, by the way, is let's say East Coast, the East Coast of the United States, the coolest arcade that's out there in terms of just the sheer volume of really cool pieces that they have, variety, great atmosphere. Just tons and tons of arcade games, tons of pinball games, lots of the old school redemption games from arcades, like the things where you roll the balls down a lane and you're making like a poker hands on a bingo card, skee ball. They have duck pin and candle pin bowling. Duck pin bowling, of course, is the pins are like small and stout, and the ball like fits in the palm of your hand. It's a smallish ball. Instead of getting 2 shots in regular bowling, you have 2 shots to knock the pins down. In duck pin bowling, you get 3. It's an interesting thing. It's a different skill set. Let's put it that way. Candle pin, same concept, but the pins are just like they're straws, like very thin. And you have the same balls that you use for duck pin bowling, and it's interesting. But they have that there. Probably one of the last places in America that has both of those games available to play. But it's a destination if you are looking to fit in like a way to scratch the itch of retro gaming when you're on vacation. New Hampshire is worth keeping on there on your list because of Fun Spot. I'm trying to remember what the name of the city town in New Hampshire. Laconia, thank you, Laconia. Laconia. I can't recommend it enough. So we're not going to make it for this year. I'm pretty confident we will be making a pilgrimage at some point next year. Because it's one of those things where it deserves a proper like filming, I guess you could say, for the channel. And I definitely see that happening. So yeah. I can't wait. But here's the thing. Like I said, we did so many cool things this year. I don't actually have any regrets that we missed that at all, because we got enough retro game trips in for like 20 years in the last few months between all the different conventions we went to, including going as far as Cleveland. It's all good. There's always one thing, because we've had a revival, I think, in our culture, enjoying not just retro video games, but just kind of like retro stuff, nostalgia across the board. That things like these conventions that come off are getting bigger and bigger, and there's more of them. I had been to a number of these off and on over the last 10, 15 years. And I can tell you that like the crowds at Too Many Games in Philadelphia, at Retro World Expo in Hartford, in Long Island, in Syracuse were crazy. Like a few of the shows that we went to, specifically the one in Cleveland, and the one in Syracuse, really specifically Syracuse, if it wasn't for the fact that you couldn't even move in those shows because there were so many people packed in there, they underestimated how many people would want to come out to this stuff. Good luck even getting near any of the vendor tables. So it became kind of frustrating. But that was like a common theme across like almost every show we went to. And like I said, I've been doing these forever, and I've never seen crowds that big. So, I said the fact that we got to experience like 6 of them, I'm like, if we didn't have time to do anything else related to this subject, I would have been no regrets whatsoever. We got so much in. But yeah, the Fun Spot will definitely be on the calendar for next year as well. A good time. So let's see here. My voice is very, very quickly diminishing. We had a couple shows earlier today, prior to this stream. So I'll tell you what, we're gonna call it at 1 hour on tonight's show. I just want to say a few things. Thank you to everyone who has come by for the streams, watched. That's okay too, and subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. This is compared to my other channel. This is a brand new like little little new baby boy that we're building, and so you're in on the ground floor if you want to enjoy this type of content. And that's about it. We'll be back next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Like I said, if you have certain games you want to see me play, we'll shout them out, we'll play them, and we'll talk about them. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.